from what I have been told by an insider source who works very closely with the president, is that she is not calm. She's worried about mass deportations. She's worried about FTOs. She's worried about what Trump is willing to do to target the fentanyl epidemic in the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if cartel sleeper cells that are living in the United States are told to activate. But other cartels that feel very threatened by this act, who in a way kind of all have smaller fragments throughout the country and throughout the United States that work together, I could see maybe a raid on a cartel stronghold, whether it's a house or a group or a certain individual gets sent back. And then next thing you know, a house blows up in Yuma, Arizona.
Let's go!
So what, obviously this is round two, because last time we had some audio issues, but we'll kind of touch base. I think probably be good to touch base a little bit what we talked about before. But, now he's actually been inaugurated and has said officially that the cartel is going to be classified as FTOs. So now we can we don't have to speculate. Like
he signed it.
You know what I mean? He signed it. Exactly. So, but for anybody listening, you should be watching. Absolutely. Pretty badass guest tonight, Katarina Szulc. Go check her out. She just did a podcast with Julian Dory. She's on BBC apparently. So if you're up at 1 a.m. Central Time and you want to watch or listen BBC Radio till 3, you can check her out. But you have a very unique role you've placed on yourself as a journalist who covers the cartels there in Mexico, specifically in the Sinaloa cartel, right?
Yes. Yeah, particularly because I went to Culiacan after El Mayo was captured, or at least after war broke out on September 9th, the infighting, to cover a lot of that. So then that kind of became, in a way, my beat, and inadvertently so, because of just how bad the infighting is right now in that state, with the two factions of the Sinaloa cartel, Los Chapitos faction and El Mayo's faction, vying for power, which I'm not really sure what the end goal here is now, because at this rate, it just looks like a house of cards that is collapsing in on itself. And no one is going to end up being the winner.
Definitely not. Could you explain the difference between the two factions for people who may be unfamiliar?
Yeah, so the Sinaloa cartel, when it originally started, there were three main leaders. Obviously, El Chapo, who we know now is incarcerated. Another leader who came from way back in the 80s, the Guadalajara cartel, who's been incarcerated for a very long time now, and El Mayo, who was the current leader of one side of the Sinaloa cartel faction, and the other side for the last couple of years has been run by El Chapo's sons, Los Chapitos. What ended up happening was this summer, in July, El Mayo ended up north of the Mexican border on a little plane in El Paso, where he was apprehended by United States authorities. There are a lot of rumors surrounding just exactly how he was captured. One of them, one that United States government and the Mexican government sort of call official, is that one of El Chapo's sons, Joaquin Guzman, led El Mayo to believe that he was going to meet him in a meeting, but ended up, quote unquote, kidnapping him, putting him on a little plane, and handing him over as he also handed himself in. Whether this was, to take everyone down with him if he was going to go down, or whether this was for some sort of plea deal or anything that could have gone on behind the scenes, it's really hard to say, and we will probably never know the exact truth. And I've heard another rumor, especially from sources that I have within nefarious areas, that El Mayo was handed over as a trade-off so as not to go after certain politicians that have very explicit ties with the Sinaloa cartel and have family members living in the United States. Easy targets for American authorities.
So that's who it was. So this was in exchange for the American authorities to not go after certain Mexican politicians, you're saying?
Rumors have it.
Rumors,
Potentially.
allegedly, right.
To me, at this point, any reason or any answer that someone gives to me as to how or why El Mayo was captured and handed over to American authorities is a rumor. I don't believe that any single fucking possibility that we're seeing, whether we're reading it, whether we're hearing it from politicians, is actually face value. Because at the end of the day, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
It's kind of wild when you realize just how embedded the cartels can be or are within the Mexican government, and just how much the FTO designation that Trump gave these guys is going to impact the current Mexican administration. You did a piece on your Substack this week on that, Claudia Sheinbaum. And then, am I saying that right? Sheinbaum?
Yeah.
Sheinbaum, yeah. And what that is going to mean for her. I know you broke it down in your Substack. Or you want to break it down here?
Totally. So, this is a big fear. I think this is what the scare is throughout Mexico or throughout even the United States when it comes to cartel associates or anyone who has profited off of organized crime from Mexico. It's not that the FTO Act is going to, go in there and target active known members of the cartel. It's that they can also freeze assets and target associates of the cartel, whether that be politicians, business tycoons, anyone who has profited off of the cartel,
Talking serious leverage,
and anyone who has any sort of association with the cartel. And we have seen too many reports of just how many Mexican politicians are infiltrated with the cartel and have profited off of the cartel. I mean, they've denied this up and down and left and right, but during Andrés Manuel López Obrador's campaign in 2006, a few years later in 2010, there was a whole investigation that he allegedly took $2 million through an associate from the Sinaloa cartel to fund his campaign. You can say it's not true, but at the end of the day, if so many people and people, whether they're in legal positions of power or they're political analysts or they're in this industry, they're in this world, are saying, I think this person is dirty. I think this is something worth looking into. And the United States government looks into it. I mean, what do they say, right? If it smells like shit and it looks like shit, it's probably shit. Yeah. So, and we have to keep in mind that Claudia Sheinbaum is AMLO's predecessor. She is his successor. Yeah, thank you. It's a little late for me. Mm-hmm. Claudia is AMLO's successor. So she is part of the same party that AMLO is from, the Morena party. And it's not just the Morena party, obviously, that has seen cartel association, but the way AMLO single-handedly picked her out, put her on the Mexico world stage, and endorsed her to the point of she won with the largest landslide victory in Mexican history. And then continues his policy against the cartels, which is abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets. You're telling me that your stance to organized crime is to fucking hug them and not shoot them?
Yeah.
What does that
doesn't
even
work
mean?
that way. It's preposterous. No. Let me ask you this. You've been doing this for how long?
Journalism for like 4 years. Journalism in Mexico, 2 years.
Right. So how much do you think, I mean, and this is a kind of a loaded but broad question, so feel free to however you feel this one out, but how much do you think the border policy the United States had the last 2 years since you've been doing this affected the way the cartels not just operated, but maybe the the less amount of obstacles they had into gaining access to corrupt politicians and influencing Mexican policy. You think that had anything to do with it?
No,
Or
sir.
made it easier?
I can't tell you if it made it easier or not, but I can certainly tell you that it didn't deter any sort of illegal activity that was going on along the border or through border relations. I mean, we literally see on a weekly basis almost of them finding tunnels that are used for human smuggling or drug smuggling, literally on the physical Mexican American border. And I know that that's existed for forever, but I think that when Trump decided to sign this act, I mean, I want to go back just a little bit because Trump first mentioned declaring the narcos FTOs in 2019, and then nothing really came of it until 2022 when Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, "Don't fucking mess with Texas." And he signed his own executive order declaring them FTOs. And he attributed that order to the deadly fentanyl crisis. And obviously, I would assume being right on the fucking border. So clearly, over these last couple of years, it's been an ongoing crisis. Because if we were talking about this, if Trump was talking about this in 2019, and then Abbott did something about it in 2022, fast forward 2025, and Trump's like, okay, let's like really hammer this home. I don't think that any border policy has really done anything at keeping the border secure, keeping the flow of drugs out of the United States. Same thing with migrants crossing illegally into the United States. And obviously we see this because we saw that when Trump took office yesterday, and the CBP-1 app was canceled, there were hundreds of migrants at the border not knowing what to do, and crime. So like clearly this is something that has been ongoing. But let's talk about the actual flow of drugs, right? Because the United States, and I will always mention this, has an insatiable appetite for drugs. So
no doubt.
And people will come at me or come at anyone who talks about the war on drugs.
They
saying,
always have.
It's like, well, there's a desire for it. Sure, okay, yeah, there was a desire for alcohol during Prohibition, but like people weren't getting their heads chopped off and hanging from bridges across an entire country, right? So let's talk about that, because the thing is, despite this insatiable appetite for drugs in the United States, there's two ports of entry. We're seeing it come in from Mexico. We're seeing it come in from Canada. Why? Because over the last couple of years, I'd like to say 6 or 7, like, give or take 1 or 2, the Sinaloa cartel has sent cartel sleeper cells and cooks into Canada, into port cities like Vancouver, where, China can send the precursors easily, to make fentanyl, so that, they're not just relying on the southern border. It's coming in also into Washington. It's coming into the northern United States. And I think Trump, even though Trump has never explicitly mentioned to such an extent that, like, fentanyl is this huge problem that it's coming in from Canada, when he mentions these tariffs, when he's talking about Canada and Mexico, he's kind of grouping Canada and Mexico in the same sort of, and I think it's because he knows, right? And also, like, if you look at CBSA reports, it's really showing that there isn't this huge flow of fentanyl coming into the United States from Canada.
What's CBSA? Sorry.
Canadian Border Service Agency.
Okay, thank you.
So when you're looking at CBSA reports on just how much fentanyl is coming into the United States, there's not a lot. And when I report on it, and I say Sinaloa is in Canada making and producing and trafficking fentanyl, people are like, shut up, it doesn't matter. How much fucking fentanyl does it take to kill someone?
Not a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have labs, it doesn't matter whether you have the labs in Culiacan, in Tijuana, in Vancouver, in Toronto. It doesn't matter where you have the labs, how much they're producing. They exist, and they're run by the Sinaloa cartel for the most part. So, Trump calling these guys FTOs, they're probably kind of shitting their pants, but they've known since 2019, and that's what a lot of people are forgetting. And these guys are, sorry, do you want to ask?
No. I was just going to say, I go ahead, finish your point. Totally.
These guys are willing to fight. And if they've known about it since 2019, and, I've seen the level of weaponry and warfare that they have, and they're basically a fucking military, right? Of course,
No doubt.
they don't stand a chance up against like the United States military, but it's not about that. It's about collateral damage, and it's about the fact that they have nothing to lose. So when someone has nothing to lose and they have nothing to live for anymore, and they're willing to die,
person.
Extremely dangerous.
I wanna keep running this thing down with the foreign terrorist organization FTO thing, but I'm curious if you can break down first question, then I'll ask you to break down like how this comes from China into these ports of entry, and then how the process goes from like cooking to distribution. Would you say that Mexico or Canada is the biggest influx of fentanyl in the United States now?
It's really hard
to
for me to say. Yeah, I kind of waver on this because it's hard for me to look at stats where I'm seeing that so much fentanyl is going into the United States from Mexico. But then at the same time, I have sources within the Sinaloa cartel in Canada that are like, we're doing it all here. And they have no fucking reason to say that to me. And then
Sure.
Also, I hate to be this bitch, but sometimes what we're seeing from the governments about just how much fentanyl is coming from where, I find it hard to believe, because there's sometimes an agenda when it comes to selling a perception of just how secure your border is or how much drugs your country is producing. So I don't know. I think it's more likely to say that it's from Mexico, but I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Canada's far off.
Let's say just the fact that you can't even tell now, right? Where it's like not definitively Mexico or definitively Canada. That's crazy, because now you're talking about really a two-front war on stopping this stuff coming into our country, and the relationships we have between like the Canadian government and the Mexican government. Neither of those, especially with Justin Trudeau, he's gone now, like aren't the best relationship, right? So, and then they're different. They're very different. So feeling those two things out and how you're going to deal with it to stop these things, they're going to have to be two different approaches in some aspects, at least dealing with it on the government level, right? But I'm just kind of wondering if you wouldn't mind breaking down how this comes into the country, either country, right? From China, how it gets produced, where it's coming into, distributed, all that stuff.
Right. So, in order to make fentanyl, there's necessary precursors, and those all come from China. Obviously, originally, all fentanyl came from China, but that changed once the Mexican cartels were taught by Chinese fentanyl cooks how to make fentanyl. So, that really synthesized the process, because now all they need are the ingredients. And I usually talk about fentanyl production just like baking a cake. It's pretty simple, in layman's terms, it's pretty simple to understand, because fentanyl really, for how deadly and toxic it is, it's not too complicated to make at all.
Sure.
Most people, it's kind of like it's giving that sort of Walter White vibe.
Right.
Because
in an RV.
Yeah, it's not hard to make, and most people who are making it are inexperienced, and that's also why I think so many people have died from it. Because obviously there's no checks and balances, and one production hand may be a little heavier than another, which can lead
It's
to
unregulated.
deaths. Totally. Yeah. So, anyways, the Mexican cartel gets the precursors from China. They obviously come in through the ports. You can also literally just order them online, and it's not that expensive. I wrote a whole article about this on my Substack, just how simple it is to make fentanyl, and just how simple it is to acquire the precursors for not a lot of money, especially considering what your rate of return would be. Like if you were to actually do it and then sell those drugs, like if you're spending $10,000 or $5,000, you're basically like quadrupling your money.
Yes.
So what's happening now is that these precursors are coming in through the ports, typically along the Pacific, which is clear because the Sinaloa cartel is in Vancouver. And it's, the Pacific Northwest. Then you got Sinaloa, Mazatlan is the Pacific Ocean. So once these precursors come in, they're taken to the lab. These labs, all the labs that I've seen, whether it be in person or through sources that I have, or through news stories, or even police press releases, anytime I have laid my eyes on a fentanyl lab, they look horrible. It looks like they're making a drug that could kill you, for sure.
Exactly how you'd expect it to look.
Exactly how you expect it to look, and it's not like what we would often see in documentaries or on those cocaine tours in Colombia, where you go and you have these kind of like older guys mixing coca in the mountains, and it's in a way it's kind of giving there's like my generational words
you're good.
But
you go for it.
It's sort of giving that, like in a way it's like, okay, like, kind of like hippy dippy cocaine making type of thing. Fentanyl is not like that. Okay. Fentanyl is not cute. And so they're making fentanyl in these really like makeshift labs for the most part. And anytime, sometimes even just like recently, the New York Post did a story about how they went into a fentanyl lab in Culiacan, in Sinaloa, and it gained a lot of traction, negative and positive, because people were saying that it was a fake lab. I don't know whether it was a fake lab or not, because I didn't do the reporting, but what I can say is it doesn't look too far off from the labs that I have seen. And it just...
Are these just in houses, like in people's homes? Like,
yeah.
Or are they renting
like a trap
out?
house, like a trap house. Sometimes it'll be in a trap house. It'll be in like a warehouse. Even it really depends on who's running the operation, and just how much fentanyl that specific lab is meant to produce. Now, another thing to add to this is that the Sinaloa cartel is now trying to make their own precursors from scratch. Sorry, before we get into that, let's talk about trafficking, right? Because that's what you wanted to know.
I did.
So once they produce this fentanyl, and keep in mind, when these guys were taught how to make fentanyl by cooks from China, basically the cook came, whether it be for like 4 or 6 months, didn't speak a lick of Spanish, and likely the guys who were learning did not speak a lick of Mandarin or Cantonese. And it was basically like, you're going to watch me cook and cook and cook and cook, and then you're going to cook, and whatever you make, we're going to put that onto the street. And if it hits, I'm going to haul my ass back to China. Done. Okay. So that was how Mexican cartels learned how to make fentanyl from Chinese. Now, fast forward, they all know how to make fentanyl. They're probably making some of the best fentanyl. And so once they've made their fentanyl, it's time to distribute it, right? And obviously, if we're not distributing most of it in the United States, we're distributing most of it on either side of the borders. We have to get that across the border. So in Mexico, of course, you've got tunnels, you've got mules. I mean, the border is just so vast, and there are so many blind spots, and there are so many methods of trafficking. It's really next level. And so, I'm not American, I'm not Mexican either. So, but when I hear people talking about we need to secure the border, or our border is so unregulated, in a way I do understand this, because you're telling me that you're getting enough fentanyl across this border to kill hundreds of thousands of Americans with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And it's going undetected. Obviously, something is wrong. It's not making sense. And so whether that be through tunnels, the same tunnels that they'll often use to smuggle people, or just having mules drive it across, or run it across, or throw it across. I mean, the methods of trafficking just to get that kilo or whatever it is of fentanyl and American citizenship, It's very simple. Now, in terms of Canada to the United States, it's mainly mules driving it across the border. Because our border is very low key. I mean, it's become sort of easy for, and I've talked about this before, for Gwen, the housewife who needed a little extra money, finds out that her niece is dating this Mexican drug dealer who needs some stuff to go across the border. Whether she knows it's fentanyl or not, doesn't matter. And we'll never, she might think that she's trafficking money across, luxury watches, even weed, right? Like, it's so unsuspecting, but it's like, we load up her car, she's going to take it across, she's going to come back, she might even grab some groceries while she's over there, fill up a tank of gas, come back across, and it's her payday, right? So that's often what's going on. And I think it also helps that, in Canada, for the mules, they're using white people. And where's one place that white people typically don't have an issue? The border, customs.
Border. Yeah.
I mean, where's one place where white people typically don't have an issue? But you know what I mean?
I get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
That white privilege.
Yeah, exactly. It's great for a border. And especially if it's someone who is coming from such an unsuspecting demographic, but they need the extra money. And a lot of Canadians need the extra money right now. This is something that I think a lot of people also don't understand is like, there was COVID, fentanyl epidemic, and our economy is collapsing. So that is just a recipe for regular people to need more money and to do things out of desperation for extra cash. And if there is an extreme demand for fentanyl, it's being made in Canada, and there's a demand for some fast money from unsuspecting folks. I mean, you have literally a roster of picture perfect mules in Canada.
Yeah, you do. Now, that's pretty scary when you think about it, because
It really is.
It is completely and totally unsuspecting group of people to come across and pump that in. And it's also not the spot that I would think of, or the layman would think of. When you think of fentanyl coming into this country, the number one thing that comes to mind, obviously, is the Chinese-Mexican connection, but then it coming across the Mexican border into the United States, whether it's Texas, California, Arizona, any of these places that touch the border, right? And it's why I'm so glad that you're talking about it, because it's raising awareness of the fact that this is coming across the Canadian border as well, which is not something I think a lot of people realize. I'm kind of interested to know, like, do you know how much the Canadian government has done to sort of try and mitigate any of that, or if there has been any real effort at all on their behalf?
I mean, so CBSE, right? Canadian Border Service Agency, in my opinion, tries to have this very strong public image that they really keep our borders safe, whether that be from drugs, guns, because I mean, if you know Canadian politics, like, we are very much no gun state. So yeah. So, they really I mean, we have a fucking show, a TV show. It's called like Border Patrol, something like that. They literally just it's like cops, but Border Patrol. Okay.
Right.
Cops, like, so American. Used to love that show growing up.
Dude, cops hits, man.
It's like I don't know. I swear all little girls love it. Like, even my 4-year-old sister loves cops. Like, it's a thing. Like, little girls love cops. Okay. And the
I
show,
didn't know that.
It's a thing.
I know a dude that loves cops. He's right there in all black. This is his favorite show.
It's such a good show. It's a good sick day show too. Okay. Anyway.
He sweats when he watches cops.
No, you don't.
No.
Nah.
He's coming for you. But so we even have like the show, right? Like our version of cops, but border. And I think they even in that show it's like Australian too, because like Australia and Canada are like sister countries.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think it's very hard to say just how much of the drugs Canada really is intercepting. I mean, literally just today alone, there was like the biggest cocaine bust in Toronto. And it all came from CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. And it came into, and I want to say it was actually like the biggest cocaine bust. Like the Toronto mayor was like, we've never seen this much cocaine.
That's wild.
Okay.
It
Just go
sounds
to
like
any Toronto bar.
yeah, California too. When we talked before, we talked about CJNC, CJNG, and then sort of what's going on there on the Mexican side of the border. I would say that if they have that much cocaine over there, this bust, the largest in Canadian history, that would say to me that they're doing pretty well, right?
They're
And aren't
doing
they sort of
amazing.
they're competitors for what's going on with the Sinaloa cartel there in Mexico? I mean, everywhere, but like as far as like the violence that you see when you're there, the sorts of things that you're around, and the people there unfortunately have to see every day. They're part of this whole myriad of just disgusting violence, right?
Yeah, and I would like to say that really the competition between CJNG and Sinaloa Cartel at this point, it's there's no fucking competition. It's really apples and oranges because Sinaloa
Okay.
Cartel is imploding on itself. And
Okay.
CJNG was always going to become the top contender. I mean, CJNG basically like stemmed from the Sinaloa Cartel, and it's like a newer
Yeah.
cartel, right? Like it started in like 2010s. They really
So all
like,
these terrorist cells in the Middle East do the same thing. Yeah.
yeah, and they really like got their stronghold like 2015, 2016, but they've always been known to be really violent. Um, and so that they scare me, like for sure. Like even when I'm covering narco stuff, um, I go to Sinaloa and people are like, "Kat, you're fucking crazy. What are you doing there?" But I'm like, no, if I was actually fucking crazy, I would go to Jalisco and like go and cover the shit that they're doing over there. Because then over there, it's like I'm gonna get raped. Like I'm like they're gonna fucking come for my life.
I was just
Um,
about to ask you, why do they scare you so much? But then you said that.
yeah, because they are just so extremely violent. They just really don't seem to have any um any sort of sense of humanity for human life, or any regard. So yeah, I just find them to be a very violent cartel, and I think this is public knowledge.
Is that just a tactic? Like obviously they're doing it, but I mean like why the departure from I've heard this compared before to like the difference between old New York style, like Cosa Nostra mafia style, where there's like a respect sort of like between criminals. You know,
Like
you don't
no
mess with
women and
people's families.
children.
Right. No women and children, nobody's families. You're not going to somebody's grandma's house and ripping her fingernails out or whatever, you know. Like what
That
is up with that? Is this yeah.
that doesn't exist anymore. That was kind of something in like the 80s in Mexico in cartel culture, but now it's people know, your wife, your kids, no one's safe. It's not like that anymore. It's not protect women and children. It's whoever the fuck gets in my way and whoever's gonna send the biggest and loudest message to not fuck with us has got to go. So yeah. So that's also like why I would be scared, because I know that they would have zero regard for like they would be, oh, you're a woman, okay, go. No, okay, fuck you, right? So the thing with CJNG now is they were always sort of vying for first place in terms of who has that sort of like Mexico cartel stronghold, because for the longest time it's been Sinaloa, right? Um, but now it is very clearly becoming CJNG. And I almost think, in a way, when things like this, like when it just so happens that the biggest cocaine bust in Canadian history, and it's CJNG, like you're trying to tell me that they're not, sitting there like, like all happy, like rubbing their hands and feet together, toes curled. Like, look at us, like we're fucking, you know what I mean?
That's what I'm
Uh,
getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I feel like that's what's happening. And it's going to happen. And I've been saying this, that CJNG is going to be the new Sinaloa cartel. Like they're not going to be the new Sinaloa cartel. They're CJNG. And I don't know who the leader is right now because the leader is allegedly, well, the leader is El Mencho, right? El Mencho, he was a police officer, and yeah, became the leader of the Sinaloa, or sorry, of Jalisco cartel. The thing is, for the past couple of weeks, there's a lot of rumors that El Mencho is dead, that he died of cirrhosis. Um, it's so hard for me to say yes, no. And I see other journalists saying yes, no. And I'm like, how the fuck are you so sure? Like, are you, do you know the guy? Like, you know what I mean?
I mean,
Because
there's a lot of benefit to letting people think you're dead.
obviously, I mean, it just happened that his son-in-law, who was dead for fucking years, was just arrested in California. So with El Mencho's daughter. So that happens, and then El Mencho's dead. You know, he is old. He probably had a drinking problem. I mean, I wouldn't cancel out the idea that cirrhosis
It's on
could have
brand.
yeah, it's totally on brand. And like cirrhosis is super common in Mexico because huge drinking culture. And also huge, like, don't be a pussy culture. Like you're gonna, throw back the beers.
Yeah, yeah.
But and then there was just a party for him. Like they held this huge palenque, which is just like this massive party. They had fireworks and banda and horses, in honor of El Mencho, which could kind of seem like he's dead. Like they were like doing that, but it also could be like, hey, look, like we're winning now. Like we're the new head honcho. So I don't know what's going on there. Does it matter? It probably matters for the FTO Act because
That's
you're going to designate, they're definitely going to designate Jalisco New Generation as an FTO.
sure.
But who's your head honcho that you go after? A dead guy or a guy who's saying that he's dead? And I mean, if he is dead, who the fuck stepped in?
Mm-hmm. No, this is actually. No, go ahead, TJ.
Oh, I don't have anything there, brother. I was just kind of thinking off of everything that Katarina had to say there. But yeah, no. The only question I guess I do have in the mix of all of this is I know that the CJNG moves a lot of cocaine. They move a lot of methamphetamine. How about the human trafficking side? Are they really prominent in that as well, like the Sinaloa was?
Yeah, from what I've heard, there's a lot of human trafficking, especially when it comes to women. Women, particularly from more South America. So Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why that I know that they also do have a stronghold on this is because the local sort of cartel gang in Mexico would be Unión Tepito. Tepito's like a sort of, it's the hood in Mexico City. And Unión Tepito is basically, it answers to CJNG. So CJNG runs like those sort of local gangs here in Mexico City. And the main thing that they do here is prostitution and human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
There's actually a whole TV show about it. It's a docuseries. I totally recommend it, called Zona Divas. And it was about this prostitution page where you go and you pick the girl that you want. And this was run by, well, this sort of Mexican businessman. I guess I have to call him that, but not to me.
Right.
And in collaboration with Unión Tepito, and you could probably imagine what these criminals' roles were in running this page.
Right.
The enforcers, and most of the women on this page, it's under a different name now, but it basically still exists. But there was a time in Mexico City, in the state of Mexico, where women from this page were being murdered on a daily basis. But obviously it went under the radar because she's a hooker. You know how people think, right?
Right.
And so it's really unfortunate. But this is a big issue here, is that CJNG, they're doing the drugs and stuff, but obviously the biggest evil, and I typically don't even get into it and report on it because it actually scares me and it actually really upsets me. And there's nothing that I could possibly do to ever fucking change this. So it's really frustrating, is that there are so many young women who are being brought under the impression that they're going to model or they're going to be sex workers for just a few years. they can pay off their debt and then they can save money and send it back home. They're coming from Venezuela. Venezuela's a nightmare right now. They're coming from Colombia. They're coming from Argentina. And they're making money here. But then they're also getting the shit kicked out of them. They're also getting murdered. They're getting raped. And this can be attributed to CJNG.
I saw too, when he categorized all these guys as FTOs, it made sure to mention Venezuelan gangs as well. How much there's Trinidad, Aragua, they're the guys that are in Colorado and some other places, North Dakota too, I believe. But the collaboration here, you said, is like mostly the human trafficking element, but these guys work in tandem quite a bit. The gangs in Venezuela and Mexico,
yeah, I would say so. But there is a level of, how can I put this? Yeah, I think Mexican cartels still keep somewhat of a distance between themselves and Tren de Aragua. Same thing like they did with MS-13, because Tren de Aragua is messy, extremely violent, and sometimes, bringing on guys that are trigger happy, that want to rape, that want to be bad, that want to, they're just bad guys. Like, obviously, I would say that, like, anyone getting into organized crime is just like a quote unquote bad, or like a bad guy, like, like a villain. But there's also like a different level of decorum, because when you're doing something because you're like, okay, I'm going to get into this, I'm going to traffic drugs because I want to make money, versus a lot of guys in Tren de Aragua who, I want to get in there and fucking kill people and be crazy and be the Joker. It's like, okay, let's get it together here. Like, you're not, at that point, you're not even a criminal. You're just like a delinquent, which is, I mean, obviously still it's not as strong of a word, because a lot of the guys in Tren de Aragua are doing extremely heinous crimes. I mean, we've seen the videos come out of Colorado. We've seen it's a nightmare. And I know that right now in Mexico, there's been a bit of this influx of in Nicaragua are people from Venezuela. But I think because Mexico has never really faced like this influx of migrants, you have the caravans and you have, people from Guatemala, and you have stuff going on here, Haitians, but it's still not to the extent where Mexican people have reached that American mentality of, oh my God, these people are taking over my country. Right. That even similar mentality kind of happened in Germany after they took in this huge influx of Syrian refugees, right? And then there was like this spike in crime committed by Syrians. So, and I don't want my words to get mixed. Like, I'm not saying like refugees or Syrians are like criminals. No, I'm giving actual historic examples. That's not even a disclaimer for you guys. That's a disclaimer for people who listen.
No, you're good.
But so I think what's going to happen is, especially with the mass deportations that Trump is saying that he's going to do, if that really happens, and if there's going to be all these deportations, keeping in mind that Barack Obama and Joe Biden deported way more people in their administrations than Trump ever did, and I always think it's important to mention that, because people like freak out when Trump says deportation, but like,
the Obama's policies on the border were way harder. They really were. It's crazy. We did an episode with Vince Vargas. He wrote a book called Borderline. He does a lot of stuff. I think you probably know Vince. Yeah. So we had him on this podcast, and he made a big point to push that about Obama and the border, just how much harder. It's weird. Like, you say that to people, and it's so much stuff politically gets memory hold super fast now in this country, but it's so true. His border policies were way more stringent than Donald Trump, and then obviously Joe Biden, without question. Joe Biden was the vice president at the time. It just shows you how much like the Overton window is shifted, but not to get like super political here. But no, you're right. It's so much different.
And I think that what's going to happen is if Trump really does stick to his word with the mass deportations, or, let's not even say mass deportations. If a larger number of people are getting deported, right? we're probably going to see a lot of Venezuelans, a lot of Nicaragua get deported. People focus on Mexicans a lot just because I think of like, that's immediately where people think because of like geolocation.
Yeah, proximity.
Yeah, proximity. But what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of Venezuelans that get deported. And they're not going to get sent back to Venezuela. Why? Because Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, even said, well, you just, drop them in Tijuana. We've got the shelters. And we can, I guess, she's wavered on this, but I think as of most recently, what she said was, yeah, just you can put the deportees in our country. It's going to be a wake-up call for a lot of Mexicans, especially people on the border, if they're getting Tren de Aragua guys, who also for a little bit got used to a certain amount of money in the United States, and now they're in a fucking border town, in Mexico.
Backsetting. Yeah.
So
Man,
it's gonna be scary.
That is scary because this is totally a consequence of the lockdown of the border that a lot of people don't even think about. Just how much you said it kind of perfectly. Like Mexico hasn't gotten to the point where Americans are like, oh my God, these people are changing our country. They're everywhere. And the Germans kind of got that way really fast too. Because I was in Germany when a lot of the Syrian refugees were there, and could tell you firsthand a lot of the crime, but they had their full really quick. But that is a crazy side effect to think about of all of these guys now being massed in this area and just how much they're not going to get along, going to be fighting for control even further. Competing with each other for money, for drugs, for women, all of these different things. To me, it just sounds like fucking jail on fucking meth, or on steroids, dude. Like, that's crazy to me to think about the amount of violence that'll probably come from this and just the work that the U.S. and Mexico will have cut out for themselves to have to deal with this sort of thing.
Certainly.
And it kind of happened with it kind of happened with MS-13 for a bit too, right? When like a lot of MS-13 members were getting deported from the United States, and then they ended up in Mexico. But the thing is, the timeline in which that happened, it didn't even really it didn't give Mexican people really the opportunity to be like, holy fuck, like we're getting these scary criminals into our country, because those guys were so scared shitless to go back to El Salvador because Nayib Bukele became the leader. And they obviously didn't want to end up in Sicot. They didn't want to end up getting arrested. Like we've seen the videos of the jails in El Salvador where everyone's heads are shaved. It's literally like, it's, they've got them on fucking law.
Yeah.
And they've incarcerated like a huge percentage of their population. I mean, you have a tattoo, say goodbye. You're done, right? And like, no set amount of time. You don't really get like a due legal procedure. You're just a criminal. And they're treated like second-class citizens. And so like when these MS-13 guys that were in the States get deported, but they end up in Mexico, they're in a way like on their best behavior because they don't want to end up in fucking El Salvador.
Yeah.
But Tren de Aragua guys, they have no really incentive. Like if they're going back to Venezuela, it's basically a free for all. It's not. They're not going back to iron fist dictator.
Man, this is the next year for sure, and then obviously after that. But it's going to be insane. We'll see come out of Mexico. So we're going to have to. Yeah. Let me ask you this: is obviously not everybody in Mexico and Venezuela is in a gang or cartel or wants to be, right?
Of course not.
But is there any appetite from the population there that isn't a part of these gangs and cartels that wants to do something about it? And other than just like, yes, I want to do something about, like, what are they? Yeah, like what is the common person? What is these, doing about this sort of thing to get rid of it out of their culture, out of their cities, out of their, where their kids play, all this stuff?
They fucking hate this, but really there isn't much they can do about it, because when you have such a high level of impunity and corruption that runs through the corridors of every level of government and authority, I mean, what could you do about it? No matter how much, I guess you could in a way become a vigilante, but you don't even want to do that. And You don't even have the money or the resources to do something like that in places like this. So it's really unfortunate because, like, when I was in Sinaloa, any person that I talked to that was just living their daily life was like, we want this to end. Their economy is suffering. Their quality of life is suffering. They can't do anything. Living in fear is not a quality of life. I mean, you guys know. When you're living your daily lives, whether it's grocery shopping, taking your kids to school, going to work, and there's this constant sense of fear in your nervous system, in the back of your mind, you're not living
Change
your
your
life.
brain makeup.
Yes,
It'll
exactly.
change the way your brain. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
literally it will. We did done studies on this.
Yeah.
Can we let's talk about these people, because I know you have a lot of compassion for the people that have to deal with this every day.
Totally.
And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you so much was to open Americans' eyes to what is dealt with on a daily basis, a regular person on the other side of the border, what they go through, what they see, all of these things, the tactics that the cartels use against them.
I had a couple
all of
questions
this,
about
like
that as well.
I just would like you, if you could paint a picture of like what this is like, what they see, what they go through, all of this stuff. I want, to humanize a lot of these people that live there, right? And then for Americans to really, as much as they can without living it, understand what it is that goes on there.
I think right off the bat, it's really important to mention that for the most part, Mexican people who are not in this life of crime, which there are a lot of them that are making an honest living, are extremely hardworking, family-oriented people. They are
Definitely.
really no different than their regular American family living in like suburban Wyoming. Like it's so
Sure.
similar. It's just a different place.
Yes.
And I think that like that's something that I would like a lot of Americans to see, and that's coming from someone who is not Mexican. So I have this fresh lens of what I've seen. And these people hate the organized crime because for most people, especially the people living in cartel-ridden regions, whether that's Sinaloa, border states, Michoacan, they have lost someone or multiple people to the war on drugs, and not overdose like most families in the United States, through murder, whether it's public shootouts, or even cases of mistaken identity are so common here where someone is picked up or murdered because they were believed to be someone that they were totally not. And I can vouch for that. Like it that really does happen. It's not family cop out. Some families do, they'll bullshit, but for the most part, that's not the case. So the problem is, right? These people, it's like what you said, their brain makeup is changing because their daily life is flooded with extreme levels of violence. I mean, like I said, it is not normal to be walking your two little kids to school, elementary school age, and you have the National Guard on the side of the road because there's 4 naked, mutilated, bloodied bodies out on display, with often accompanied with a sign that has some sort of threat written on it. So imagine you're like a 6 or 7-year-old boy and you're seeing this on a weekly or like bi-daily basis. And then you're going to school, and kids are playing games like that are really violent. Like, you play cops and robbers in school, whatever. But for these kids, that's just like real life.
Yeah.
And then the music that you're listening to is also so deeply entrenched in the narco culture. I mean, like Mexico's most popular singer is Peso Pluma, who all he really sings about is crime and narcos. I'm not a fan of the music just because like I don't really like it, but I understand the appeal. So it's everywhere. And even when I was in Sinaloa, there was a guy who claimed he was being chased by armed men. And so he ran into a supermarket screaming for help because it was obviously a case of mistaken identity. and screaming for help and asking them to call the police, and he hides in the bathroom. And so I guess the workers at the supermarket call the military and the National Guard. And luckily, they pull up in time for these armored guys to not find this man who was hiding. So the armored men retreat. Military is there. This is like a huge supermarket in the center of Culiacan, the capital city of Sinaloa. And I'm literally filming a reel outside, talking about this is daily life for people in Culiacan. You know, it's anything. It was like noon, and it's like anything, any time of day, any place. There's this looming threat of violence. And as I'm filming that, like I can see in my phone that there's a family of 4 walking up behind me, and I'm like, fuck, they want to go grocery shopping for sure, right? And so I turn around, and they're looking at me like they already knew what was going to happen.
Can't go in.
I'm laughing, but it's just so ironic, right?
No,
like
yeah.
I'm literally painting this picture, and this happens, and they're like, it's done, right? And I'm like, yeah, you can't go in. Like, it's closed for the day. And it's just so frustrating. And it's so, like, you know, when I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but this is how I kind of paint the picture of what the sentiment of people living in these regions are. Is like, you know, when you're so tired and you've like done a million things in a day, and it just feels like nothing is really going right. And then you go to make your dinner, and let's say, like, you know, you put everything in the frying pan and you're making it, and then you're so tired and hungry, and you turn around and you knock the fucking frying pan off the burner, and all the food spills, and you just cry. Like you're just so you're done, right? Your wits end.
You're done. Yep.
You're done. Like you're just so frustrated, and everything has come to a head. But like all you can do is just cry because your emotions have just like overwhelmed you.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like the sentiment is like for most of the people that are living in Sinaloa or like narco-ridden regions. Like that's the best way I could imagine or explain how those people are feeling, especially the people that I've spoken to, because it's just one thing after another, after another, after another. And yeah, I have a lot of compassion for them because I really can't imagine your daily life being like that scenario that I gave you every single fucking day. And then add to that, you're seeing dead bodies every day. You're hearing shootouts every day. Maybe, you know, your car gets shot out like 4 times in the span of 2 months. Like you have to replace your windshield and all your tires. And it's just like, what do you do? And then, you know, I hear from some dumbass people being like, well, you know, they can just leave. That's not how life works. You know, you don't just pack up your life and leave. For most people, that isn't feasible. And also, you don't want people to leave a region. Like you're not supposed to, like, look at Detroit. Like you're not supposed to abandon a place that is succumbing to crime because it becomes a failed place. And so I have so much respect too for people who stay and for people who try to operate honest business, even though I know it's fucking almost nearly impossible. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
No, I can't even imagine. And this is another reason why I'm so glad you're talking about this, is because the people that live there, the everyday people like you're talking about, they get put in the middle of this all the time. And the cartels use them as just collateral and probably use them in a lot of other terrible ways, just, you know, as leverage to get their way, you know, whatever it is that they're using them for. But my concern, and I expressed this to you, was like some of these places here in the United States where cartels do have a hold for this, you know, the more that they're gone after in the United States, like you said, desperate people do crazy things. They'll do whatever it takes, right? Is the concern that some of these tactics may spill over into American neighborhoods, and Americans may have to deal with some of this. Obviously, not in the same scale that like you know, people in Mexico are dealing with it, because it's just so much more riddled with that. But that's kind of something I want people to understand, is like, you're going to be in the way just like everybody else is in the way, potentially, right? You're going to have to, you may see something like this where you live, whatever it is, these honest businesses, like you said, your kids going to and from school, like these are all things that can be leveraged against you and used as leverage to, hold on to territory or a drug operation or human trafficking operation or whatever. And it would be really easy to kill the American appetite to put up with this sort of stuff if you start using Americans as collateral, as just, fodder for this war, right? That will eventually happen, especially going after some of these places in the United States. Tom Homan just said today that they already started going after and into cities. And they're getting rid of people that are in jails, violent offenders and stuff like that. But that he said that they're going to start going into homes too, and that it doesn't matter. They're not going to tell ICE or Border Patrol they can't arrest somebody who is here and is here illegally. So like as this happens, something like this is going to happen where Americans are going to see this and they're going to become fodder in this the same way Mexican citizens are.
I think so too. And I think that because, like I mentioned, the cartels really have nothing to lose at this point. And there's a strong sense of nationalism in the cartels, not nationalism in the sense of we're Mexican,
right?
In the sense of we're narcos, because that's a culture within itself, right? And so, it's like the gangsters that'll die in the United States. They're like, I'm a G, I will live and die as a G, and blah blah blah, all that shit. So what's going to happen is, we declare them FTOs. They've been ready to fight, and they won't go down without a fight. And also keep in mind possibility. Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican government, is not happy with the FTO declaration whatsoever.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
If there is two fronts where you've got the American government, American military, and the narcos, and in comes the Mexican government, which side do we really think they're going to choose, right? They're going to choose their side.
Right.
And I'll give you a great example of just how they did this, is because when, they're already afraid of American intervention because they've already seen this happen with the capture of El Mayo. And no one was declared an FTO this summer. So just imagine that extra level of power that this act gives. So when El Mayo was captured and was handed over allegedly by El Chapo's son, Joaquin, the Mexican government announced that they would charge Joaquin with treason for kidnapping and handing over a Mexican national to the American government. It speaks for itself.
It does.
So once we see these cartels declared as FTOs, if the Mexican government is going to have to choose a side, which it eventually will, and Trump has a way of strong arming Sheinbaum. I don't know if she heard this, she'd probably want me to be dead. But I don't see the Mexican government saying, yeah, Marco Rubio, Rubio wants the Mexican government to collaborate with Americans on this FTO Act, right? I just don't see that happening. I think it's too ideal. And then there's too much corruption, and there are too many people in positions of power who are afraid of having something revealed by this FTO Act designation, right? So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the way you describe it and the reality of it is that it's impossible to have a political solution here. And I think that the way you say it, right? I mean, if she is this in bed with, allegedly, I don't want to say something to get you in trouble somehow.
Yeah,
or
everything
whatever,
is alleged.
Allegedly, potentially, yeah. And it makes it very hard for there to be a political solution when you're not a real politician, right? And I'm talking about Claudia Sheinbaum, right? You're not a politician in that you're bought out by cartels, potentially and allegedly, right? And I think that Trump and Marco Rubio, right, know this, right? I think that they probably have a pretty good understanding or a safe assumption that this is the reality. And they probably have some sort of plan or idea or whatever what they're going to do about this. But the idea of a political solution here, I think its viability of happening is going to become really evident really quick. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
for sure.
One way or the
Yeah.
other.
I give it like, we're going to see this within the next 2 months, like hardcore for sure. It's because the simple act of Trump throwing around the word FTO during his campaign was enough to sort of ruffle some feathers.
You
So,
heard some of this like through the little grapevine there?
oh
People
yeah,
being concerned? Yeah.
yeah.
What did you hear?
Well, the Mexican president has been putting on a really good face in front of the Mexican public that there's no need for concern and everything is fine. I mean, even she does a morning press conference almost every morning, and even this morning, super calm to the
What
point
else is
where
she
I'm,
gonna do?
yeah. But when someone's just like so calm, you're just like, all right, like, let's be a
You are
little bit
too
fucking,
relaxed for this. Yeah.
yes, like I was
Hey,
getting to a
bro.
point where I'm like, what? And I was gonna go this morning, and no, it was too much. But from what I have been told by an insider source who works very closely with the president, is that she is not calm in the slightest. She's very worried. She's worried about mass deportations. She's worried about FTOs. She's worried about what Trump is willing to do to target the fentanyl epidemic in the United States. And especially considering how much of that he has attributed to the Vault of Mexico. So, and then also her not being invited to his inauguration. She said
Yeah.
in her press conference, no pasa nada. Like, it's not a big deal. It's fine. Well, apparently behind the scenes, it was the biggest fucking deal.
Really?
It was not
Do
cool.
tell.
I also don't want to say too much because this is why usually when I talk about anonymous sources, like I'll write about it and post it just because I can really control what I'm saying, because I can never risk revealing that person.
Yeah, we don't want you to be at risk. Yeah, no, nothing. Obviously, like
Certainly.
no pressure, right? I
No,
don't want to put
but
you in harm's way.
It definitely was a big deal, and Trump not inviting her definitely struck a chord with her, and not in the sense that it made her mad or felt slighted. It made her worried, concerned. What is he going to do? What does he know? Type of thing. And I want to actually go back to what Americans could see with this FTO Act, because I think that we're going to see some heightened conflict along the border towns. It's quite likely that whatever happens would probably be more centralized in Mexico. So, there's the port of Veracruz in Mexico where, if there's any sort of American intervention, I could see it sort of happening there. It's further away from the border and it's closer to major cartel strongholds. But I think that any sort of cartel sleeper cells, associates, or smaller factions along the border will sort of be those guys who are kind of willing to go down and who will say, you want to come for us, we're going to come for you, and kind of show their boss that they can, flex their muscles.
Return the favor.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if cartel sleeper cells that are living in the United States are told to activate, are told to, jump into action and protect what is theirs or whatever power that they sort of have in the region that they're in the United States. And
you think that would, I don't want to cut you off in the middle of your idea. It's okay.
Say it.
I was just going to say, do you think that that'll lead to like terroristic style level acts of violence when you say activate?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. And I have people that disagree with me on this, but yes, because they have the capability. So why the fuck would they not? And if they feel like they're in a losing battle, why, especially if we're talking about the Sinaloa cartel, La Familia Michoacana, the Gulf cartel, like CJNG aside, because like CJNG, I feel like they're going to kind of be like, okay, we're going to kind of deal with this in our way. But other cartels that feel very threatened by this act, who in a way kind of all have smaller fragments throughout the country and throughout the United States that work together, I could see it happening where, yeah, there is maybe a raid on cartel stronghold, whether it's a house or a group or a certain individual gets sent back. And then next thing you know, a house blows up in Yuma, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Listen, man, in any sort of conflict, the will of the people is vital.
Absolutely.
And this isn't unique, this is a tale as old as time. If you go after the spirit of the people who are involved and then they become collateral, caught in the crossfire, as it were, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that these cartels realize that too, right? And Americans already don't have an appetite for a lot of things. We are very squeamish people. We like our creature comforts. We're all very squidgy around the edges now, unfortunately.
Very spoiled.
Very spoiled, exactly, and entitled. This stuff happening is going to quickly turn into, what are we doing? I don't want to deal with this. Oh my God, all this stuff, right? And that is exactly the sort of thing that would, work in favor for cartels here operating in the United States.
I mean, from an outsider looking in, I think Americans are pretty, you guys are pretty nationalistic, and you guys want to,
For sure.
make America great. Like literally, you guys have all these slogans about saving and maintaining America, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think
no
if
shortage.
Mexican cartels started attacking in American soil, yeah, Americans would be scared. But there would be a lot of Americans who would be like, all right, let's fucking go.
Well, yeah.
There's a big demographic there's a lot of veterans in this country.
Especially
all
on the border towns. Like,
that's no shit. Yeah.
You're telling me fucking Texas isn't going to be like, all right, Sinaloa, let's fucking go.
Yeah.
There's people from Texas who went to Ukraine.
Yeah. No. I mean, I totally agree with you. There's especially that demographic of person isn't going to take any of that stuff laying down for sure. Some of these other cities like Chicago, where they have these strongholds, like that's the kind of people I'm talking about for the most part, right? Yeah. That are going to lose their appetite for this really quickly. Especially
in urban
Billy
centers.
Bob, backwoods Texas, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Billy Bob with 30 guns and I'm imagining Reba McEntire in the basement of her house there in Tremors, right? If I could date myself, if anybody gets that reference, but no, yeah, absolutely.
One brother.
Do you? Hell yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
The elephant gun, but that's probably TJ actually. But I'm kind of wondering too, like, are you able to, without like giving away anything, explain their tactics and what they do, how they operate inside the city, in secret or wherever they're at in secret, what they do tactic wise to integrate and get around and stay out of, the watchful eyes, so to speak.
In the U.S. or in Mexico?
Let's do both. Why not both? Let's do Mexico first.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in Mexico, they really don't need to do much to stay out of the watchful eye. A lot of them don't do anything to stay out of the eye. You've got Rolex, Lambo posting about cocaine. Like it doesn't matter, because there's so much impunity here. Of course, the head honchos are taking Bin Laden level, like precautions.
Measures.
Yes, to maintain their safety, kind of staying off the grid in a way. El Mencho, I would say, is a really good example of that. El Chapo, not so much. He was a flashy guy. But El Mencho, he strikes me as the kind of guy who had that sort of that Bin Laden concrete compound, and he would, take that call under the great leaves, like 3 times a day at different times, different cell phones.
It's a good picture.
Yeah. I think that's real. Like I read it in the files. But anyways, big Bin Laden fan over here. Not like literally. That's not what I meant.
You heard it here, guys. She said
she's got posters in the bedroom and all.
I know, right?
Forget Bush did 9/11. Katarina
I didn't
did
even
9/11.
know I had a calendar.
That's it, man. When she was a small child, she orchestrated 9/11.
I wasn't even born. Or no, I was. It was. I was 8 months old during 9/11. Anyways.
Wow. Man, I'm old. Okay.
Sorry, guys. I don't remember seeing the buildings go down. But
it's okay. You can watch it on the internet whenever you want.
No kidding.
Yeah, thanks for that. But no, I'm not a big Bin Laden fan. I just like I read history stuff. But anyways,
we got you.
Okay, but I do have to clarify. You guys don't understand. The internet is a scary place for people like
You're
me.
right.
Okay.
The comments.
So, especially with AI, imagine what they could do with that soundbite.
No kidding, dude. We just gave it to them.
So, yeah, I mean, in Mexico, you don't have to be so under the radar. It's obviously ideal if you are, if you're in that sort of head honcho position. But for a lot of others, it doesn't matter, and you don't really need to be. Obviously, in the United States, it's very different.
Yes.
Let me give you I guess I could paint 2 pictures here, right? Because people are probably going to say, well, I see drug dealers, balling out all the time. You see them at Atlanta strip clubs or with the fancy cars, with the fancy watches. It's very different than, let's say, for example, El Mencho's daughter and son-in-law, who were living in Riverside, California, under fake names. Yeah, they were living in I think a $4 or $5 million house, but they could have been living in a $20 million house. You know what I mean? I don't know what kind of cars they were driving, but let's say they could have been driving a G-Wagon. They weren't driving a fucking Bentley, but they could have afforded that. She was running, I think, a coffee shop. There's certain measures that they take because you can also live a luxurious lifestyle while still not setting the alarms off.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I would say that's what they were doing. And I think that that's why they got by. There were certain things that obviously set the alarms up, like buying the $5 million house in cash. Probably not the best idea, but they're probably...
But driving a Beamer or a Porsche around that area of California, that doesn't stick out at all.
It doesn't stick out. I mean, really anywhere in California nowadays, it doesn't matter. And I think that, of course, they're taking a lot of precautions also to protect their financial assets, and what financial assets are available for people to see, whether that's just the regular person, how they're perceived in their community, but also the IRS or the Mexican government. I mean, the Mexican government, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, they definitely are taking precautions. The right people are taking the right precautions. But I think that there are certain things that you miss, that these people that they'll miss. And then that's how they're getting caught. It's what happened with El Chapo. It's not really what happened with El Mayo. El Mayo was also a very good example of someone who was very under the radar. But that was almost out of his control in a way, because there were so many figures at play, and no matter which sort of hypothesis you go towards of what happened, he was going to get turned in either way.
Yeah, right.
Did I answer that?
You did. Yeah, no, I mean, the other thing I wanted to just kind of wondering, what Americans, if anything, can do to keep themselves safe, or what precautions they can take or whatever. I mean, a lot of Americans own guns. A lot of people have concealed carry. A lot of people will carry concealed even if they don't have a concealed carry. There's a very hefty culture, to your point, of guns in Texas and a lot of the other border states for sure. Chicago has a hell of a lot of guns, even though they have some of the strictest gun laws in the United States. But what are some things, that Americans can do? Maybe something that doesn't seem so obvious, like carry or whatever, right? Or don't put yourself in some of these situations.
I don't know, because I don't even know if like carrying is even like a great piece of advice. Like, oh, if the cartel is infiltrating your community, well, at least you have a gun. Like, I don't know, they have drones and grenades and RPGs.
That's why I asked.
So like,
Yeah.
cool, I have a Glock. Like, might as well just shoot myself with it at that point. I don't know what people can do to be safe, because I don't even know what Mexican people who are living in this day-to-day can be safe. I think the best advice that I could give, because this is the advice that I follow in my job. Sorry, that's my sick cough.
Fine. No
Is
problem.
to have common sense and to be aware of your surroundings and the people that you associate yourself with. So if you are worried right now, like say, for example, there's someone listening. I would love to say, there's a girl my age, like a 23-year-old girl listening who's into the shit, and you're dating a drug dealer who sometimes mentions that, he works for the cartel and he picks you up and he's like GT or whatever the fuck and takes you to nice dinners. And if you are worried for your safety and you're not willing to put your life on the line because things are about to heat up, you need to step away from those types of people in your life and have some understanding and value for your own life. And if you don't care, that's your cross to bear. Stick it out, whatever. But if you find yourself in a really bad situation, I, have to be the one to say that you can't feel bad for yourself then, because you have to understand who you're associating with. And I think for a lot of people, especially if you're living in border towns or if you're living in popping cities where there's a lot of cocaine and there's a lot of partying, it's really important to make sure that you know who your crowd is, because one spoiled apple ruins the bunch. And with this, it rings extremely true. And to have some common sense, like always be self-aware and aware of your surroundings. I'm very aware of my surroundings at all times. And when I'm with girlfriends who are not socially aware, I lose my fucking shit.
Mama bear.
It drives me crazy. But, there are certain things you can avoid, but there are a lot of things that you can avoid and be aware of. So if you can take that into account and be careful.
Trust your gut.
And always trust your gut, especially if you're a woman. We talked about it.
We did, yeah. Let's talk about what you just said about like these arsenals that the cartels have, right? Like I said tactics before, but like let's talk about that. What do they have? You said that it's very military-like, and obviously, it is. I've seen it, but
questions as well.
Just what's that? What's that, TJ?
Oh, that was one of my questions as well. That's one of the couple things I had on deck.
Let's hit it up, bro.
Absolutely. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole because I knew a bit about the roots of the CJNG because of what I used to do and people I came across that used to buy, different chemicals to manufacture methamphetamine. They come out of Mexico. A lot of them came out of sort of the root gangs, the Los Milenios, and the people that sort of started to structure that broke off from other cartels. So I wanted to learn more about them after we had first kind of gotten into trying to talk to you about all of these different things so that I would have at least some form of an education, wouldn't be sitting here like a total ding dong. And I found out a couple things about them that I didn't realize right off the bat. Number one, they've become very militarily organized. They have kind of a military type structure to them, which is why it makes sense that you're saying they keep kind of a lower profile as far as the people out around communities to try to kind of fit in more. They don't stand out and try to do the flashy drug dealer, television show thing. But on top of that, the way that they move, they have drones, they have RPGs, they do a lot of things tactically instead of just coming out, flashing guns and going gang violence style, firing with a pistol turned sideways over the top of cars. I'm trying to be a little goofy and stereotypical with it there, but they're a lot more structured. In that, the only other thing that kind of stood out to me is, aside from drugs and, human trafficking, what I found was a lot of what they are making their revenue from, because they estimate that CJNG is worth somewhere in the area asset-wise around $20 to $30 billion. And a bunch of it is through exploitation of agricultural. And that was something I didn't realize. So they have a really, really big set of hooks into the entirety of the agricultural industry, as well as into Pemex, the nationalized Mexican oil company. So they've been extorting, gasoline, diesel fuel, things like that. They've also been very heavily extorting agricultural farms, as well as like the limes, chicken, tortillas, all kinds of different things out there.
Avocado is a big one for sure.
Absolutely.
I took that on Julian. Yeah.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, and that was something that I didn't really realize. And once I started thinking about that, some of the other repercussions that are going to come from all of these actions taking place. So when people get desperate and some of their security is being cut into and their finances are being cut into, which is certainly going to be part of what happens with all of this new activity that's coming from the United States, these guys are going to tighten their claws into the people who are parts of these industries they've been extorting all this time. So those people are going to see a much greater degree of suffering than they have thus far. They've had this somewhat involuntary but working relationship with the cartels to have to be able to keep operating their farms and everything. And now they're probably going to cut much deeper into these folks because they're going to start losing bodies and they're going to start losing revenue. They're going to start seeing assets being seized up and a lot more investigation coming into them now with the classification that they've been given. So I would assume there's going to be a much greater suffering on all of these people who have been, extorted by them all this time.
Unfortunately, yes. And that's why, a lot of people are really looking forward to seeing this FTO Act hammer down on these narcos. But there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. And if you want to get into the agricultural thing, I mean, that was like one of the first things that I was looking into when I started doing this. I would
love to know more about that, because I know even American agricultural land, like a foreign country's owning, and then the Batista brothers in Brazil own a ton of land there in the United States too. But yes, please, I want to know more about that. That intrigues me quite a bit.
Well, like avocados are, they call them green gold for a reason. It's like it's just as profitable in a way as fentanyl. And you know what? The Super Bowl is coming up. You know how much money the Super Bowl makes for the Jalisco cartel? Because the Super Bowl is a huge consumer of avocados. We could probably search it up. People hate when I say this,
human
but
trafficking, actually.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always every year I look up just how much avocados they're going to be using for the Super Bowl, because they use like so much guacamole and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
What a weird stat, man.
All those avocados come from Mexico. And all those Mexican avocados are from like Michoacan, Jalisco, like the cartel regions.
Right.
So, and I love to search it up, and people say, you shouldn't have to search it up. You should just know it. And it's like, who the fuck knows that? But okay.
Who cares? Look it up, dude.
How am I supposed to know how many avocados you guys eat during the fucking Super Bowl? I don't even watch that shit. Right. But the problem is, particularly the Familia Michoacana and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel basically went into the avocado orchards that have been owned by families for generations, and super successful orchards, because growing an avocado tree takes a very long time. I talked about this on Julian. It should, ideally it takes like 7 years for a successful avocado tree to grow, but it can take like 15, and then it can fail and you start again. So
crazy.
Yeah, I'm in these like cross avocado tree group chats where like Mexican farmers are trying to like cultivate their trees. And it's so hard, like, and it's a lifelong dedication. It's actually very admirable, and especially considering just like how many Americans want to take drugs, just as many Americans want to eat avocados, right? Like, I don't know, people love avocados.
Especially here in California. Yeah.
Very true. Exactly. I have a stat for that, actually, since that is what I do. I am the T. Jamie portion of this also. 138,000 tons during peak Super Bowl season is how much of avocados are shipped from the Mexican state of Michoacan to the United States. It's expected to buy more than $350 million worth of avocados just for the Super Bowl related events by themselves.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah. So let that sink in. All these avocados are coming from Michoacan, where a lot of these avocado orchards are run by the cartel, because these guys go into these smaller towns And first of all, they start off by monopolizing the water that you need to actually cultivate your orchards. Orchards? Is that how you say that? Orchard?
Yeah.
Orchard. Yeah.
An
Okay.
orchard. Yeah.
Thanks. Clearly, I'm not a farmer. I'm a narco-journalist.
You don't look very farmerish.
They monopolize the water and make it harder to get and make it more expensive. So when they're like irrigating the land and doing everything that they need, so that becomes something that's now run by the cartels. And then they'll pull up. I paint this picture, and Julian too, is you'll get some guys in armored vehicles, pull up, armored men, to the avocado farm that you've had in your family for, let's say, 3 generations, right? I'm throwing this out there. And they say, listen, you have a very successful avocado farm. You produce a lot of avocados. Americans are buying your avocado. You're exporting. This is great. So you're going to give it to us. Get the fuck out of your house. Get the fuck off your land. Leave everything here. And you have 2 days to vacate this place. Or you can give us X amount of money, and it's usually an exorbitant amount of money that no one could ever afford, and you can keep it, and you're still going to give us a certain percentage of however much money we ask for every month, which basically will run that family dry. Like they will lose everything.
Fucking parasite.
And a lot of families try to do the latter because obviously, you've spent years building and cultivating something that has become profitable and it's honest. Imagine, like, if I had a fucking avocado tree that took me 15 years to make and it's finally, I'm reaping the fruits of its labor.
You care about that avocado
That's
tree.
my kid. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, instills some sense of pride in you to know that, like, you built this with your hands, or your grandfather did it. Or your grandmother used to rake these lands. Like it's incredible. And then you have these motherfuckers come in and tell you to leave. It's horrible. And there are so many people now, who have completely lost their livelihoods and are living in major cities. They left the farms because their farms were taken over by the cartel. And so when you're eating your guacamole on Super Bowl Sunday, just know that you are probably contributing to cartel revenue.
That's
crazy,
absolutely
right?
Wild, man.
That's rough.
Yeah. No, I've learned recently that, the Super Bowl, especially not even just where the Super Bowl is held, but airports in general. And the airports like in Vegas where people go to gamble, anything sporting event.
So much human trafficking, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Big sporting events where there's a lot of traffic is when a lot of this human trafficking can go way more unnoticed than normal. And they actually have like task force and stuff like that go out there during these times because of that, try and catch it because they know it's going to be ramped up.
In the Vegas women's bathrooms, there's like hotlines on the back of the doors.
Is there?
And craziest story is I had a layover in Vegas when I went to go see Julian. That was in October. Okay. And I went into the bathroom. It was around 3:00 in the morning, and tell me why all of those they were ripped off. Like someone tried to like rip them off or like scratch them out, and literally into every stall. So they have people that will go in and purposely try to get that off. Especially, I'm under the assumption that if they are actually
that's disconcerting.
It's horrible.
Yeah. One of the things I heard you talk about on there that actually was really intrigued on, but you touched on a very small portion of it, were women that are involved in this and do this to other women. I know you said you had like plans. I don't remember if you said you were planning on like writing a book or doing a series on your Substack about it, but I was really intrigued to hear that and wanted to ask you if you would be willing to go more into it. I don't know how much you want to keep like close to the vest or whatever, but that was really interesting to me, the women that do this to other women in these situations.
Well, like for me, it's very important to particularly do stories that cover women. But something recently that I've learned is just how many women who were victims become the victimizer in this world of organized crime. And so, yes, I'm really trying to work on a series for TV or like something
Yeah,
about women who
I think it would do well.
it would do amazing, but it's like there are
Yeah,
so many women in
hats off to you.
organized crime who are committing extremely heinous crimes and, running a lot of the show, especially in border towns, um, and doing things that are extremely illegal, uh, human trafficking, um, drug production and trafficking, and also cutting up people's bodies.
Casual look over your shoulder, cutting up
Oh,
bodies.
there was a dog.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
you're good.
I got distracted.
I feel like I'm like asking you questions that are going to get you in trouble or put you in harm's way stuff.
No, I'm very careful with what I say. And, it's funny, actually, I get a lot of shit about that. Like, even on Julian's podcast, people were saying, how could you not completely condemn the cartels and all of the narcos that you talk about? You're an evil, horrible person. It's like, well, first of all, I basically work with these people. Like, let's just clue in for a moment what that means, right? So, no, I think it's, there are a lot of women who are very under the radar, because one thing about women in crime is, they might want the flashy stuff, but a lot of these women were in such a desperate position to begin with that once they get the money, all they use that money for is a life of comfort and safety. So they are willing to become the victimizer if that means that they will no longer have to endure the desperation or abuse that they went through at a certain point. And it's really shocking to me, like in Tijuana, to see women who are trafficking other women from, southern regions to TJ, putting them up in a place, and then having them work and taking a cut from it. It's just, it boggles my mind, because there's also so much, there's so much psychology behind it. And also really in practice, like, it's just very harrowing, because, men are evil, but men will come at me for this. It's fine. I like men, but men are inherently typically more evil than women in terms of what men are willing to do and the types of crimes men have historically committed. Women are more emotional when it comes to their crimes, which means that you're probably often not going to have a woman randomly just go up and start raping and killing people for no reason. I mean, I don't think a reason is a good excuse ever for any of these heinous crimes. But when I'm hearing about women pimping out other women after that's exactly what happened to them, it's weird, and I think it's weird to
It's like
anyone.
a control thing.
It is. It's like a control thing, and it's almost like a way to sort of reclaim the dignity or the power that she felt like she had lost. So I would love to tell these stories, and I have some really incredible sources on standby ready to tell these stories, just because there really aren't other women journalists like me who, I don't judge, I don't put the fault. I'm willing to listen to anything, and I will always protect the anonymity of my source, whether they are doing a bad thing or not, because I'm not a cop, right? And I say this all the time. I'm the messenger. I'm a storyteller. So yeah, these are some stories that I'm really looking forward to tell. But I don't share a lot about it because it's like this work in progress that I really want to pursue.
Totally fair. Yeah, no, I kind of figured when I asked you, but I A, wanted to know more, but B, also kind of wanted to tell you that, like, I think that's a great idea. And I do think that whenever you're able to put it out, whatever format you put it out in, that it's going to catch a lot of attention and people will be really interested in it. And
I agree.
It would almost be worth it to talk to, or I don't know if you included this already or thought about it, like women psychologists, who would be interested in learning more about it too. Like, I just think you could go so many different areas with it. Like, I think it's a kind of a brilliant thing you're doing that way. So,
totally.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if you don't mind me asking, how do you incorporate yourself into these things? How did you get into doing this and make these relationships with people? Like, is this something that, like, I know why you got into it. Like, this is a passion that you've had for a long time, right? And you've said that repeatedly. but like, how do you facilitate getting in with these people, earning trust, building these relationships? Like that takes time. It takes a commitment. It takes, courage for sure. Right. You put yourself, I'm sure, in some dangerous situations.
Well, those are literally all three things that I have: the time, commitment, and courage.
Right.
I,
There it is. Right. Your autobiography, time, commitment, courage, cartels. Right.
ew, that would be so
Yeah.
ugly. That's really
It is.
corny.
That is a terrible name, right? Yeah. Time,
Um,
commitment, courage,
courage.
cartels.
Oh God! And then instead of C, we just put like all K for Katarina. Like,
There it is. Wow, we've done it. There it is, guys. We won't put this in the episode so we don't give it away. Yeah.
so yeah, I'm gonna
Just kidding.
trademark that. So it's funny because I get asked this a lot, especially because, and when we met, you said like I don't look like my job. So I think for me, it's when I'm going into these places or trying to get in touch with certain people who are rather nefarious, they don't look at me as someone who is going to be a threat, because I'm not a threat, right? I'm not someone who's corroborating with authorities. Never will. And I have had uh, authorities, U.S. Marshal, reach out and ask
Wow.
me something. And
Yeah.
no, not my job. And I would never, even if I had the answer to whatever that question was, I would never give it away. And that's not because I, want criminals to be free, but it's because I wouldn't be able to do my job if I played both sides of the coin. And my job is telling these stories. And that's always been the most important thing for me. Growing up, all of my role models were these incredible female journalists in Mexico and in the United States. And one thing that I gathered from all of these women is we're here to tell a story. We're here to gather as much as we possibly can because the public deserves to be informed and the public deserves all of the information and the most honest information. And one thing about me is I have always been very honest, brutally honest, and it always got me into a lot of trouble. But one thing that now finally honesty will not get me in trouble, because one thing that you can never be too much of as a journalist is honest. And so, and people will always try to come for my credibility, for any journalist's credibility, because also it's confirmation bias. And I truly could not give a fuck, because a lot of the times with people who are coming for my credibility, they aren't even journalists. So what do you know, right? But for me, when I'm talking to these people, I never judge them because, I say this all the time. What difference other than the birth lottery or the opportunities that I had in my life that kept me from not doing exactly what these people are doing, What kept me from not becoming a stripper, or for not becoming a drug mule, something like that. You never know. And I think these stories are really interesting, and they play into the world stage of like policy, the war on drugs, really anything, security. And I'm really interested in these stories. And I try not to get lost in the gossip. So when we're talking about narcos and cartels, right, I'll always go beyond the headlines. I'm focusing on the people. And a lot of people who read the type of reporting I do, they want to know like who's the big guy and who's hiding out where. And I will include that, but I'm always making sure to take it back to who's really affected, what really matters. Why is this story a story? Why is it timely? Who is it affecting? Because I think a lot of the times with these kinds of things, especially because narcos and cartels are so glamorized in our culture, we forget to always go back to the root of the people who are dying and the people whose lives are affected. So for me,
Absolutely.
I got into this because I love telling stories and because I love digging in and because I know that I can go and talk to these people without an inch of judgment, and they're willing to share with me. And also sometimes it's just a matter of I'm a pretty young girl and it becomes loose, they'll share with me more than they will
Yeah.
share with another colleague. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Well, really, the last question I had for you, and I appreciate you coming on with us, even though you're sick, and I know
So
you're going to be up
sick.
for the.
It's
I
so
know you got to be
embarrassing.
up for the Brits
I'm
even
coughing
later.
like a fucking toddler. Like, you know when like you have like a toddler who's like and they're like
I have
snotting.
one that does that. Yeah,
Ew,
absolutely.
that's me right now. I feel like a toddler. Like every time I cough in public, I'm just like I sound like a petri dish.
Do you just like hold your phone up to your face and just like cough right on the screen? You
As
know, like
I'm
kids
watching
do.
Coco Melon
Yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah, like that. Is that you? I could see it. I believe that without a doubt.
And then I'll
reality.
like take a swig of my friend's water, but it's like all backwash in there. That's giving
Right,
toddler.
right.
Oh, man.
A little snot gets on the straw or something. You know.
These
You
are
know,
rough
I
ones.
love
Absolutely.
Maybe I have to
kids. It's so
marinate
funny.
on.
I love them. I sound like I'm a hater. I love them.
No, kids are great. They're a lot of work, but absolutely,
Absolutely.
kids are wonderful. I
So
love my
worth it.
kids without a
I was
doubt.
just in one of
You
those giant
better.
No
petri
doubt.
dishes yesterday.
Yeah.
My,
What'd you say?
I said I was just in one of those giant petri dishes yesterday. It's my
Oh,
youngest
dude, if you have
birthday
kids,
party.
your house is a petri
We went
dish.
out to one of those big indoor amusement places, and usually the traffic's not that bad on a weekday, but because it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day here, the school districts were closed. Like every kid was in that place. I've never seen
Places just
anything
smell
like
like feet and the flu, dude.
Oh, dude,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's an intensely accurate description, brother.
It is. I've been to them. But really, the last question I want to ask you is, what is something that, because you have such a unique perspective, is something that a lot of people just don't know or don't see, that you know is interesting, or is just, whatever it is that catches your attention that you know is not talked about enough in what you do or what you see?
Oh man, there's a lot. Um, I think maybe for a lot of the people that are in this organized crime world, it's not as glamorous as it seems. It's not like when you're watching Narcos and they are living it always in these amazing mansions and getting driven around and wearing luxurious clothes.
Sounds like it's popping off where you live right now.
I know I was just thinking that. It's certainly
They heard you.
it's certainly not as glamorous. And for a lot of people who think that this is something that maybe they want to get involved with, or, I want to be hard, I want to be cool, especially people in the States who may have that cartel connection, or they know someone who's doing some of that shit.
CJNG was on TikTok.
Yeah,
Did a lot of recruiting on TikTok.
there's so much propaganda, and don't fall for it. Like, don't be a dumbass. For someone like me, for example, I'm actually a good example for this because I'm really intrigued by this stuff. Of course, there's like a part of me that I love knowing about this and I love reporting on it. But I would never get involved in it. And I've seen a lot of people, their common sense is clouded by money or the potential to make money. And you have to remember, I mean, unless you have a death wish, your life really isn't worth any amount of money that you could possibly make in this lifetime.
It's a great point.
Especially not working with these organized crime, these cartels that are just popping people off as if they're like disposable, like the tissues I'm using right now that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
just not worth it. And people could probably come at me and be like, well, you're in risk and you're doing this. Right. But I value my life and I know that there's an expiration date. And I know that once that call is coming, that you need to wrap it up, I will wrap it up. Because, yeah, sure, I have big balls, but I don't have a death wish. So, there's a big difference there.
You're the kind of person I would say that this is a calling for you. It's more than an interest. It's more than something you work at just to get yourself involved in because you're interested in a story or putting something out there. Like, a calling is the right answer, and that's the right word to use for you. That's the impression I get just when you learn about who you are, and I'd implore people to go and listen to like other podcasts you've been on and read your Substack, because you really do have such an interesting, unique story. It's not just something that even fell into your lap. Like, this was almost like you were in a line, beelining towards this sort of thing, like your whole life. And I think that's pretty incredible, because there's not a lot of people, I think, that can sit there and say that they have a calling and they're doing exactly what it is that they're meant to do. And I think that you're one of those people, and you don't often get to talk to those sorts of people.
Oh, I could totally not do, like, there's nothing else I could imagine myself doing. I've always wanted to be a journalist, and a tough one, I was never going to be an entertainment reporter. No hate to that, but I wasn't going to do fluffy stories.
Red carpet. Yeah.
There was no way. Or even just like daily news. Like or like, what I really wanted to do, like when I was really young and I started saying I want to be a journalist, whatever. You know how many people, weather girl, right? Man, slap me, it'll hurt less. And everyone like does their own thing, and I respect it. But for me, it's like what you said, like totally a calling. Like I could not imagine having done anything else. And sometimes people ask me, like, what would you have done if you weren't a journalist? And I don't know. There's
not many people can say that.
Yeah.
Maybe people like, I've always wanted to be a mom, or I hear women say that pretty often. Like I hear a lot more women say that than I hear men say, oh, I've always wanted to be a dad. I do hear that, but it's not as common, right? But like that level, like you're talking about, like it's admirable, to say the least.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think a lot of the people that like follow my reporting, or who are invested in what I do, like also recognize that, which is really nice. It's nice to see, like, I really appreciate that kind of support, because I worked really hard at this, and I am really young, and I'm, in the grand scheme of things, fresh. And so when people are respecting my reporting, or respecting me as a journalist, it actually does really mean a lot. Like, and I see a lot of those comments and a lot of those messages of people being like, keep at it. This is really good, or you've got balls, or well, if I'd be worried if I didn't have haters. Like,
that's it, man.
If I have haters, I'm dead.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah.
Right. You got to piss some people off, dude. That means if you aren't pissing people off, you have no principle.
We live in a world of easily offended people. That's for sure. So you're going to piss somebody off no matter what.
That too.
Oh my gosh. No, and we talked about this too, because on Julian's podcast, he really asked me a lot about myself, like my personal life and why. And, I felt like I talked so in depth about that. And I'm still getting a lot of messages from people saying, can you write a story about your origin story? Like, as if I'm like fucking Harley Quinn. Like,
superhero, dude. Yeah.
But, I talked a lot about that. But that also opens me up for a lot of hate, because, or just even commentary, because for the longest time, I was very, Katarina the journalist. But now it's kind of becoming Katarina the journalist and the person. Or how she became. So I think that's really interesting, because everyone sort of has an opinion on it. And then I don't mind opening up to that, the criticism, because I also think me telling that could be inspiring for other young women to be like, okay,
absolutely,
I could literally do whatever the hell I want.
When you look at some of these OnlyFans chicks online that a lot of people see, they get the attention, and young women see it too. Like, I would rather, given even the dangerous nature of what you do, my daughter look up to somebody like you than anybody else, right? I mean, you have conviction, you have courage. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at what you do. Like, this is, first off, it's not a role that a lot of women are in the first place. Like, it's more dangerous for you as a woman, but obviously it's dangerous for men too. But like, the fact that you're willing to do something like this, and the knowledge you put out, and the perspective you give, and the work you do, like, those are things that, anybody could really look up to, but especially for young girls looking at somebody as like a positive role model to get into, especially anybody, a young girl looking to be a journalist or something like that too. But any of them, like, way more positive role model than somebody that gets online and shows their ass.
Exactly.
Well, see, I can't recommend this job because it is dangerous.
For sure. Yeah.
But I would say,
Principle wise.
yeah, for principle wise, I can't recommend this, but I can recommend that, if you're a young woman and you're like, what can I do? What can I become? Whatever the fuck you want. And I can't knock the OnlyFans thing either, because it's given a lot of women money and financial freedom in a way that a lot of women probably never expected they would ever be able to achieve, because it's online and, it's safer than traditional sex work, like going and meeting with a John. And I get a lot of comments of people asking me why I don't have an OnlyFans, when I'm going to get one.
Solid.
But, for me, that's not my passion. My passion is journalism. So, and I think I would probably make more money if I did OnlyFans than if I did journalism. I'd also probably be safer. My life would be less complicated. It's actually
That's not
funny.
you, though.
No, it's not. And it's really funny because a lot of people talk about how, there's like this one girl, she's going super viral right now with OnlyFans. And I must say, I really disagree with this. I think it's actually
It's like the
heinous.
world record chick.
Yes. The
Yeah, that's
Lily
gross.
Phillips girl, the
Yeah,
sleep
yeah.
with
That's nasty.
100 or 1,000 men in a day. That to me is fucking repulsive. And
It
I
is.
think it's also a slap in the face to a lot of women who are, well, because of my job, trafficked or, forced to do this kind of stuff. Because, you know what? Blanket statement, no woman wants to have sex with 100 men in one day unless there is literally something wrong with you.
There has to be. I agree.
It just doesn't make sense. But, people are seeing this, and then people are seeing how much money she's making. But if you really think about it, how is her job or doing that any less dangerous than what I'm doing, right? It's just, it's different. It's definitely
Yeah,
different,
it's different.
a different form of labor. But I think it's really important that a lot of girls see, like, there's so many more options, because right now, like, sex work has become, like, there's like this whole liberal feminist movement of like, sex is liberation. And it's like, no, dude, because the only person that's profiting off of your your sexual liberation is a man. So, like,
Right.
how is that feminism? But, okay, whatever. This is like off topic, but this is,
No, go on. Yeah, go ahead.
but I think, like, it's really cool if I can do this type of stuff and show girls, like, you can literally go into a male dominated field where I am basically always the only girl when I'm on assignment or work trips or like on panels or whatever. Like, I'm
A
pretty
badge
much
of honor for you.
yeah, I'm pretty much always the only girl, and I'm usually like the youngest. And of course I get shit on for that, but truly, objectively, there's nothing bad about that at all. And I really hope
I
that
agree.
like other women, especially young women, can see what I'm doing and be like, okay, fuck it. Like, I want to go and pursue something too, especially like if it's out of the ordinary. Or even if it feels like it's not making a lot of money at first or whatever it is. Like, one thing that I always told myself and thought with this is, I'm never going to chase the money. I'm just going to chase the passion. Like, whether the money comes or not, like, that'll, I think that if I'm passionate and business minded enough, I can eventually make something profitable out of my passion. And here we are, right?
Certainly.
So,
No doubt.
but
Well, you've done it
I
with
think,
integrity, and that's the most important part, I think.
Amen,
thank
TJ.
you. I try my best.
Oh,
Yeah.
most definitely. Well, here in the States, of course, one of the biggest things that the mainstream media and people who classify themselves as journalists get ripped apart for now is they've all sold out. They preach a narrative on
Yeah.
a political tangent rather than just telling a story. They show bias in everything that they do. And the way you're conducting all of these things, you're not showing any biases at all. You just want to get the truth, regardless of whatever else. It's not about your opinion. It's about the truth and the story that's out there. The sides of things that come from the cartels, the sides of things that come from the military, and of course, the sides of things that come from the communities that everybody overlooks, and how they're affected and what their involvements
Well said.
are. So, I think it's
Thank you. And I
it's
try
incredible.
I do work at that. Like I actually, that's definitely like for me, one of my like standards, my ethics. And which is also an amazing reason. Like it's amazing part of being independent because I only answer to myself. And for me, even when I was at CBC and I mentioned this on Julian and people said, oh, well, she was at CBC, she lost all her credibility. Well, when I was at CBC, I was still very unbiased and honest, and all my reporting reflected that because I was still an autonomous person, a reporter working at a news outlet. And I was not told what to say at any point in time. Even like when I go on BBC, when I contribute to any news outlet, it's me. It's Katarina Szulc, and I maintain my standards across the board. But being independent is incredible because everything that I'm posting on my Substack and everything that I'm posting on my Instagram, it's vetted by me. It's investigated by me, and I've gathered everything. And for me, the most important thing to be as a journalist is to have integrity, to be honest, and to be unbiased. And of course, it's in human nature to have an opinion. I mean, I just told you my opinion about liberal feminism, right? And people are going to disagree with me on that, but I think that's healthy and I think that's normal. I think it's important to have this public discourse, and I fucking love when people comment when I'm reporting stuff and people are like, okay, but are you sure about this? Or they're being critical because I don't think enough people are critical thinkers nowadays. So if you're criticizing what I have to say or my reporting, good. And it's awesome because I see that these people who are critical, they follow me, they subscribe to me. So you're not being a hater, you're being critical. You're not a dumbass. And I will appreciate that like every day.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. No, it's totally okay to challenge ideas. I mean,
Totally.
there's not enough of that at all. So, Katarina, where can people challenge everything? Exactly. I know you've said it 100 times, but where can people find you? And then obviously, guys, we'll have all her links in the show notes so you can access her work.
I'm on everything. So it's everywhere. It's Katarina Szulc, Katarina, last name Szulc. And that's on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok if you want, doesn't matter. But most importantly, Substack. Substack is where I post a lot of my deep dives. I go live on there. And then I'll post free stories every now and then, especially if it's a really important breakdown that I think that the audience needs to be aware of. But also just fund and support my independent journalism. I need money. So you can subscribe. It's like $5 a month. It's really nothing.
It's not bad.
But there's I'll post a lot of exclusive content on there, especially with insider sources or deep dives that I've done that you can't find anywhere else, that no one else is doing.
Outstanding. Well, thank
you
you for coming on with us, even though you're sick. I know you got to stay up late to go talk to the British about things there. But take care of yourself. I appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you some more, and then whatever else you put out. Like, I know you're going to write a book someday. Definitely going to get
Hopefully.
it. So,
Oh, thank you. I'll get you signed copies, guys.
Hell yeah, dude.
That would be fantastic. Certainly love.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Absolutely, Katarina. And I will catch you guys in the next episode.